Of course you are, yes. Oh,
every few decades.
Indeed,
So
Phil.
they
Let's
all want to
bring in
be a
Isabella
part of
Higgins
that.
now, who's outside Buckingham Palace, some 300 metres away. Isabella, we can see some movement behind you as this ceremony gets underway at St James's Palace. Justin Welby here, Liz Truss entering the room. We can see the new Queen entering. She is a member of the Privy Council as well. Penny Mordaunt, the new Prince of Wales, William, entering. They will oversee and sign some of these documents as these oaths are taken. Let's just listen in here at St James's Palace.
The business for part one of the Council. My Lords, it is my sad duty to inform you that Her Most Gracious Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, has passed away on Thursday, the 8th of September, 2022, at Balmoral Castle. I propose that, when certain necessary business has been transacted, a deputation consisting of Her Majesty, His Royal Highness, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lord Chancellor, the Archbishop of York, the Prime Minister, the Clerk of the Council, and myself, shall wait on the King and inform him the Council is assembled. I now call on the Clerk of the Council to read aloud the text of the proclamation.
Whereas it has pleased Almighty God to call to His mercy our late Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, of blessed and glorious memory, by whose decease the crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland is solely and rightfully come to the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George. We, therefore, the Lords spiritual and temporal of this realm, and members of the House of Commons, together with other members of Her late Majesty's Privy Council, and representatives of the realms and territories, aldermen and citizens of London and others, do now hereby, with one voice and consent of tongue and heart, publish and proclaim that the Prince Charles Philip Arthur George is now, by the death of our late sovereign of happy memory, become our only lawful and rightful liege lord, Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of his other realms and territories, King, head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, to whom we do acknowledge all faith and obedience with humble affection, beseeching God, by whom kings and queens do reign, to bless his majesty with long and happy years to reign over us. God save the king.
God save the king.
I now invite those on the platform to sign the proclamation. Drafts of 8 orders of council. 1. Ordering the proclamation to be printed and published in specialist supplements in the London, Edinburgh and Belfast Gazettes. 2. Directing the Lord Chancellor to affix the Great Seal to the proclamation proclaiming His Majesty King Charles III. 3. Directing the kings, heralds and pursuivants of arms to attend at the Court of St. James to proclaim His Majesty King Charles III. 4. Directing the Lord Mayor, the Court of Aldermen and Commons of London to attend at the Royal Exchange to proclaim His Majesty King Charles III. 5. Directing His Majesty's Secretary of State for Defence to give directions for the firing of guns at Hyde Park as soon as His Majesty is of His Majesty's Tower of London to give directions for the firing of guns at the Tower of London as soon as His Majesty is proclaimed. 7, directing His Majesty's Secretary of State for Scotland to cause the proclamation for proclaiming His Majesty King Charles III to be published in Scotland. 8, directing the Clerk of the Council to issue circular letters for causing His Majesty King Charles III to be proclaimed, are hereby approved, and that concludes the business for this part of the Council. I now invite the deputation party to accompany me to wait on the King in the Council chamber.
So that was the first part of this Privy Council meeting, the Accession Council, where they signed the proclamation, and that was made up of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, the Lord Chancellor, Brandon Lewis, who's the Justice Secretary, who was just appointed in the last couple of days, the Prince of Wales, Prince William, Camilla, the Queen Consort, the Clerk of the Council, the Lord President as well, Penny Mordaunt, who we just heard from, and the Lord Keeper of the Privy See. And now that...
So the next order of business is that the King himself arrives and he takes on a series of oaths. Now, this will be the first in a series of oaths that will take place in the next few days, where he will pledge continuity of government, pledge support for the Church of Scotland, the Church of England, and this will be repeated around the country as well. We also heard during those proclamation orders by the Lord President, Penny Mordaunt, instructing a certain series of events to take place, including the firing of gun salutes from Hyde Park and the Tower of London. That'll take place, 41 guns firing over the course of some 70 minutes later on this morning, as those proclamations are read out for a second time in the City of London.
So this ceremony hasn't taken place for 70 years. Juliet Reedon will bring you back in now, and it's the first time that we're able to see it take place.
Yeah, first time we've seen what it looks like, and it's funny because it does, especially Penny Mordaunt there standing in front of that painting, which is of old London, almost Tudor London, I think. I can't tell exactly, but it felt like Tudor London. It almost feels like we're back in those days, doesn't it? With all these Privy Council members, and it's very interesting to see it.
Let's bring in Phil Williams. We understand that King Charles is arriving at this moment. Cameras spinning around. He's taken the short drive some 400 metres from Buckingham Palace to meet the Privy Councillors himself.
That's caused a bit of a stir here, of course, with all the media rushing to see his vehicle go through at high speed. But of course, he now meets with the Privy Councillors, and he now makes his proclamation, which will then be read out at the courtyard just in the building just behind me here, probably in about 20 minutes or so time. So yeah, as you see, it was a very set ceremony, a very solemn ceremony. And of course something that hasn't been seen since 1952. So everyone involved in planning that ceremony would have had to dust off the rules and the regulations and the form of how it would go. And of course this is the very first time that we, the public, have got a view inside to that ceremony. It's never been publicly seen beyond the people in the room before. So yeah, a bit of history being made every day for the next 10 days, in fact, or so. History will be made, because every day there will be part of this process, that movement from the Queen to the King, and the significance of that, and all not just the ceremonial aspects of that, but also the legal aspects of that too. So this is just another step along that way, and shortly we'll probably be seeing the King being greeted inside the palace and being basically told that the Privy Council has approved of what's happening there, and that he will be shortly making his own proclamation before that's read out, before the actual proclamation announcing that he is king is read out in the courtyard behind me.
Phil, as we speak to you, we're seeing members of the Privy Council leave the picture gallery to enter the throne room where they will receive King Charles III. It must be quite an extraordinary thing to have such a huge task that is largely ceremonial but has such an enormous impact, not only there in the UK but around the world too.
Yes, absolutely, and it's got to be remembered that this is not a significance not just here in Britain. It's so many of the countries around the world, including Australia, New Zealand, Canada, of which the King is now head of state, and that's no small beer. This is very important stuff for all of us, and the ceremonies, of course, are ingrained tradition. Going back not just a few decades. This goes back hundreds of years that these ceremonies have evolved, and it's something that, of course, the Brits do extremely well. They do these royal events extremely well, and no doubt, when the time comes for the coronation of the King, that will be an incredibly lavish event that will be seen around the world also. But for today, now, of course, we knew he was king the moment his mother died. But now that recognition, that official recognition, is about to be given. And
we see them now standing inside the throne room where King Charles, I should say, will join them shortly. Phil, Australia is represented in a small way on this Privy Council, isn't it? Yes, and our High Commissioner, our new High Commissioner, she'll be in that crowd there now. We're hoping to talk to her after this ceremony is over. A duty she probably didn't anticipate. She's just newly installed, but that's nobody knew. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, did not know that when she met the Queen just a couple of days ago, in a few days' time, she would be part of this event and a part of the events associated with the passing of the Queen and the proclamation of the new King. Phil, we see on that throne platform a number of documents laid out. The King is about to take a number of pledges here. What do they encompass?
Well, one of them is to do with the Scottish Church, and let me read you a little of what he's going to be saying there. He's going to be talking about, and this goes back to 1717 or so, when it was basically a guarantee for the continuity of the Scottish Church, and that will take probably about 15 minutes or so to read that out. And of course, and he has an oath that he says that he will promise to swear that he will inviolably maintain and preserve the settlements of true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland in prosecution of the claim of right, and particularly by an act intinuated an act for securing the Protestant religion and Presbyterian Church government. So there's a lot of legalese there. There's a lot of words that were probably written back in 1714. But again, all part of the ceremony, but also a very practical part of what he has to do over the next few days. And he's not going to be all just focused here in London. He's going to be travelling back to Scotland. He's then going to Northern Ireland, and he'll also go to Wales. So he will be travelling the country, basically announcing himself effectively, and hopefully, I'm sure he will be well greeted in all of those places, as he was yesterday when he went for his walkabout just outside Buckingham Palace.
A deep mix of emotions, Phil, given the relative celebration of this moment, alongside the broader mourning for Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, and it is a confusing moment in that sense, isn't it? Because, he has lost his mother. His children have lost their grandmother. It's a deeply personal moment for any family to lose a beloved senior member of their family. And yet at the same time, he is now the king and has so many state duties and has so many responsibilities. And of course has been waiting in the wings for 73 years. In a sense, the longest apprenticeship that anyone has ever had for this position. So yes, very confusing, very tiring and very intense moments. As he said to Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, yesterday, I'd been dreading this moment, but of course now that moment has hit him. The emotional impact, of course, is no doubt still being worked through for him and for his extended family. But the reality is he's got all these ceremonies, he's got all this pomp and pageantry to get through the next few days before he can settle in to his own rhythm. And what will that rhythm be as King Charles? Well, it's hard to tell yet. He has signalled that he won't be as active, won't be able to be as active in the sorts of passions, the Prince's Trust, perhaps his environmental issues, his architectural interests, organic farming, those sorts of issues he may still be promoting. He perhaps will be doing it in a less open way, because as monarch he has to be seen as never to meddle in politics and never to meddle in policy. So that's basically a new stricture on the way he's operated. He has actually, managed to express his views on all those things in various quarters, even to government ministers in the past. He won't be able to do that as directly now.
Phil Williams, stay with us. Let's bring in Juliet Reedon, who's still with us here in the studio. Juliet, I wanted to ask you to pick up on some of the things that Phil was saying there about the emotion of losing his mother for King Charles. He looked emotional when he addressed the nation and the world yesterday in his first televised address. He's expected to make a personal declaration about the death of the Queen today. Is that going to be emotional in any way?
I'm sure it will be very emotional, yes. I thought Prince William, Prince of Wales now, looked very emotional there as well. Not just the solemnity of this event and obviously the weight of the workload that's coming his way. He also looked like he was in deep grief for his grandmother. And I think all of this is becoming very clear today for all of the royal family. This is the passing of the baton, but it also means that Queen Elizabeth II is not there anymore. Grandma is not there, Mama is not there. And she was the one that was always at the top of these ceremonies, always leading them, always guiding them, always training them. So I think we will all feel that emotion today.
Just as recently as a few weeks ago, you could see her on the balcony, sort of tut-tutting the kids and telling them how to behave. I mean, that's recorded throughout history, from the balconies to the processions. She was a guide to the family. Will King Charles now take on that role?
I think he will, yes. And I think he has already been doing that, certainly with his son. I don't know that Prince George is quite ready to take that sort of training yet. But
they do start them young, don't they? They kind of have to.
They do start them young, and they do have to. And actually attending events like this and all of those more official, perhaps solemn events is very important, because you have to understand the solemnity of them and how they underpin the monarchy. This is the mystique of the monarchy, but this is the reliability of the monarchy. We know that this legal situation underpins the whole of the head of state situation.
How important are ceremonies like this? How much does the palace want the public to be able to see ceremonies like this?
I think more and more the public want to see these ceremonies. They have been hidden in the past, and slowly over the years we have seen them more and more.
Okay, let's hang on for a moment there, Juliet Reedon, because it seems as though the doors to the room have opened, and this could be the entrance of those Privy Council members who we saw sign the declaration earlier, the proclamation earlier. And we should be seeing King Charles being welcomed in as well. There is the Queen Consort, followed by the Prince of Wales, Prince William, and King Charles III.
Business for part 2 of the Council. Your Majesty, to make your declaration.
My lords, ladies and gentlemen, it is my most sorrowful duty to announce to you the death of my beloved mother, the Queen. I know how deeply you, the entire nation, and I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered. It is the greatest consolation to me to know of the sympathy expressed by so many to my sister and brothers, and that such overwhelming affection and support should be extended to our whole family in our loss. To all of us as a family, as to this kingdom and the wider family of nations of which it is a part, my mother gave an example of lifelong love and of selfless service. My mother's reign was unequaled in its duration, its dedication, and its devotion. Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I am deeply aware of this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty which have now passed to me. In taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example I have been set in upholding constitutional government and to seek the peace, harmony, and prosperity of the peoples of these islands and of the Commonwealth realms and territories throughout the world. In this purpose, I know that I shall be upheld by the affection and loyalty of the peoples whose sovereign I have been called upon to be, and that in the discharge of these duties, I will be guided by the counsel of their elected parliaments. In all this, I am profoundly encouraged by the constant support of my beloved wife. I take this opportunity to confirm my willingness and intention to continue the tradition of surrendering the hereditary revenues, including the Crown Estate, to my government for the benefit of all, in return for the sovereign grant, which supports my official duties as head of state and head of nation. And in carrying out the heavy task that has been laid upon me, and to which I now dedicate what remains to me of my life, I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
I have with humble duty to crave your Majesty's permission for the publication of your gracious speech.
Approved.
Concerning the security of the Church of Scotland.
I understand that the law requires that I should, at my accession to the Crown, take and subscribe the oath relating to the security of the Church of Scotland. I am ready to do so at this first opportunity. I, Charles III, by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of my other realms and territories, King, Defender of the Faith, do faithfully promise and swear that I shall inviolably maintain and preserve the settlement of the true Protestant religion as established by the laws made in Scotland in prosecution of the claim of right, and particularly by an act intituled An Act for Securing the Protestant Religion and Presbyterian Church Government, and by the acts passed in the Parliament of both kingdoms for union of the two kingdoms, together with the government, worship, discipline, rights and privileges of the Church of Scotland. So help me God.
I now invite Your Majesty to subscribe both copies of the instrument, confirming the oath has been taken. I now invite the witnesses to His Majesty's oath to sign both copies of the instrument.
So this is now all 200 members of the Privy Council who are there in attendance. out of the some 700 of them in total who will sign the proclamation as they leave. We've already seen the Prime Minister of Scotland, or the Leader of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, sign. All of them will do that before leaving, and then we will see some of the pageantry take
Draft
place.
of an order in Council authorising Your Majesty's declaration to be made public.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council for recording the oath relating to the security of the Church of Scotland, to be transmitted to the Court of Session, to be recorded in the books of Sederant, and afterwards lodged in the State Papers of Scotland and in the Council Register.
Approved.
Draft order in Council determining the form of proclamation for proclaiming Your Majesty in the realms and in the British Overseas Territories.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising the Lord Chancellor to make use of the Great Seal for sealing all things whatsoever that pass the Great Seal, until another Great Seal be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising the Lord Privy Seal, if need be, to make use of the existing Privy Seal until another Privy Seal is prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Drafts of 3 orders in Council authorising Your Majesty's principal Secretaries of State, the Lord Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, to use the existing seals until other seals be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising Your Majesty's Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to make use of the existing Great Seal of Northern Ireland until another seal be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising Your Majesty's First Minister of Scotland to make use of the Great Seal of Scotland until another Great Seal of Scotland be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising Your Majesty's First Minister of Wales to make use of the existing Welsh Seal until another Welsh Seal be prepared and authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council authorising the public seals authorising the respective public seals lately in use elsewhere than in the United Kingdom to be made use of until new seals be prepared and their use duly authorised.
Approved.
Draft of an order in Council confirming Your Majesty's wishes in relation to the Sovereign Grant Act 2011 to continue the tradition of surrendering the hereditary revenues, including the Crown Estate, to your government for the benefit of all, in return for the sovereign grant, which supports your official duties as head of state and head of nation.
Approved.
Drafts of 2 proclamations. 1. Appointing the day of Her late Majesty's state funeral as a bank holiday in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. 2. Appointing the day of Her late Majesty's state funeral as a bank holiday in Scotland. And of 2 orders in Council directing the Lord Chancellor to affix the Great Seal to the proclamations.
Approved.
I now invite Your Majesty to sign both proclamations. And that, Your Majesty, concludes today's business for the Council. May I now invite the deputation party and the witnesses to the oath to exit via the picture gallery and the matted hall. I now ask Privy Councillors present to exit via the picture gallery and the matted hall and invite you to sign the proclamation, which is laid out in the lower corridor. Thank you all for attending today.
Penny Mordaunt, Lord President of the Privy Council, overseeing this proclamation of King Charles III in the throne room at St James's Palace. All 200 present members of the Privy Council now move to signing those motions, a series of oaths and pledges confirmed by the King himself in that speech. Juliet Reardon, he began that speech, the King, talking about how much it's meant to him receiving those motions of condolences from around the world.
Yes, he did. And he also mentioned, he talked about the irreparable loss that we have all suffered, but that his family has suffered. He said, it's the greatest consolation to me to know of the sympathy expressed by so many to my sister and brothers. So I thought that was nice that he's thinking about the whole family, not just himself and his sons, but he's talking about his siblings, of course. And then he talked about the wider family. And I think the idea that the public is supporting him here, that the public is feeling sympathy with this family, is deeply touching for King Charles, but also is really helping him at this moment in time.
And he said that the whole world sympathises with me on the irreparable loss. He also then went to talk on about the heavy responsibilities that have now passed on to him.
Yes, and I think we see that here. It's actually really interesting seeing this ceremony here, because you do see how serious it is, that heavy state of office, how important all of this is. I mean, one of the things that he's been asked to do, the heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to me, and taking up these responsibilities, I shall strive to follow the inspiring example of my mother, to seek the peace, harmony and prosperity of the peoples of these islands, to uphold constitutional government, to seek the peace of the Commonwealth realms and territories. I mean, this is a pretty big job, isn't it?
We heard earlier today in his speech very deep consciousness that this wasn't a moment just for the United Kingdom, but for the whole world. He's clearly taking that role, particularly as head of the Commonwealth, very, very seriously, conscious that he has to reach right around the globe.
Yes, well, the Commonwealth, we know, was very close to the Queen's heart. It was her baby. You know, she started with a very small number of nations and grew them to more than 50.
And a transformation of what that relationship meant too, right? It wasn't empire anymore, and she tried in her own way to make it about equals.
About equals and about friendship, and about a sharing of ideas and a sharing of learnings and values, yes. And that's what the Commonwealth is today. Obviously, Australia plays a very large part in that Commonwealth, and King Charles wants to ensure that the Commonwealth continues in the same essence that his mother set out there.
He also went on to say in those comments that he just made in his oath that he is profoundly encouraged by the constant support of his beloved wife. And we must mention that that picture there of King Charles III, Camilla, the Queen Consort, and William, the now Prince of Wales, that's the first time that we've seen them together since the death of the Queen.
Yes.
Publicly.
Yes, well, and also there we have that triumvirate that are the key players now in the new monarchy, and they look very united, don't they? They look very much as if they're supporting each other and they're taking on this mantle together.
And it's been far from an accident of history that Queen Camilla was on that platform party signing that document as a member of the Privy Council, because it was the Queen herself who endorsed her being put on the Privy Council so that she could be there for this very moment.
Yes, I think the Queen knew that her son desperately needed this, the love of his life by his side. You know, this is a very important office. It can be a very lonely office, so you do need your partner beside you. She sought all of that strength from Prince Philip, of course.
How does she go with that notion of, you know, taking on this role and having that sort of prominence and all the good and bad that comes with it? What's her relationship like with the media, with the public, that idea of being a public figure?
Look, I think it's something that Camilla has had to grow into. It's certainly not something she sought, and it has become part of her role. She actually has a very good relationship with the media. She's one of the best loved members of the royal family. She's a lot of fun. She's very respectful of the media, and she gets a lot of support from the media because of it.
When you say respectful of the media and that there's a good relationship, how does that manifest itself?
Manifests itself when you go on events with on engagements with the Duchess of Cornwall. Queen Consort now. Hard to get.
We're all learning very quickly.
We're all learning on this.
I've fluffed it a few times.
But yes,
We've
Camilla
had to
Queen
think
Consort.
twice about all their titles.
Yeah, it means when you go on engagements with Camilla, she interacts with the media. She understands that the media is, there's no anger or any bristling there, and she really appreciates the media being there to cover those events and to bring her work to a wider public.
So if you've just joined us, you're watching special coverage of King Charles's proclamation. Shortly we'll see the principal proclamation from the Fiery Court balcony by the Garter King of Arms at St James's Palace, and that'll be followed a little later on by a 41-gun salute taking place at the Tower of London and in Hyde Park, spanning some 70 minutes, and that message being read again in the City of London.
So what we're seeing now, those pictures were just the final Privy Councillors, the last of the 200, making their way out to sign the proclamation. As they left, we saw the former British Prime Minister David Cameron there, one of the remaining people to sign that proclamation as they walk out.
16 or 17, when I spent 6 months, I learned a hell of a lot. As you can imagine, I have a huge affection as a result.
Over half a century, Charles came to this part of the world 16 times. At Geelong Grammar fondly remembered the young prince of 1966 in an interview with the ABC before he passed away.
Highly intelligent, very kind and very sensitive young man whom I was going to enjoy teaching.
Charles had a knack of charming the locals, and the locals often surprised the prince. A bikini-clad kiss on Cottesloe Beach in 1979 set the tone for tours to come.
I asked Prince if he minded if I'd give him a kiss, and he just looked at me and smiled, and he said, OK.
You don't have one of these teleprompters?
No.
In 1977, Prince Charles famously endured an interview with a very nervous Molly Meldrum.
Your Royal Highness. Oh, I'm sweating like a pig.
There's an old show business